he just glanced back at the running drill pipe, and his expression suddenly turned tense. Operator Caleb cautiously reached out, touching the crack in the pipe. When he pulled his hand back, his fingertips were covered in mud. Before he could react, more mud gushed from the wellhead. The scene before them made everyone around freeze in place instantly. The control room immediately closed the annular blowout preventer, temporarily cutting off the mud in the pipe. But workers on the rig were still fleeing in panic. After being knocked down, Caleb got back up and immediately asked what to do. The engineer told him to open the drill pipeline to release well pressure through the diverter system. Caleb didn't hesitate, rushed to the valve at great risk, and forcefully opened it. This action temporarily stopped the gushing mud, yet no one realized that this was merely the prelude to the whole disaster. The day before the accident, a group of workers arrived at the heliport with their luggage. They were about to board a helicopter, heading to the Deepwater Horizon drilling platform offshore. Before disaster struck, everything around seemed unusually calm. Everyone in the cabin was chatting and laughing casually. After all, this was just their daily routine. Some first-timers even exclaimed that the drilling platform looked like a giant ship. Calling it an industrial miracle would not be an exaggeration. Soon, the helicopter landed safely on the platform's helipad. After the platform's supervisor, Jimmy, got off, he found the crew responsible for cement bond log testing was packing up. He immediately asked if the test was completed. The man didn't give a straight answer, his expression seeming to hide something unspeakable. They got no answers, so Jimmy took Mike to the control room. Mike was the platform's chief electrician. While Jimmy spoke with the staff, Mike first performed a routine check on the equipment. The instruments showed the power system was normal, but a mud recovery vessel was still moored near the platform. According to normal procedure, the transport ship still being there meant the previous operations weren't fully completed. Jimmy had never received the cementing test results. This meant that someone, to start work early, had deliberately skipped a crucial test. Jimmy rushed to the central work area to ask. The workers said they had never done a negative pressure test. After reaching the control room, Jimmy learned from the chief engineer Jason that BP had already sent the inspectors away early. After Mike heard the news, Mike decides to go with Jimmy to confront the person in charge. Before leaving, Mike habitually tosses a coin into the sea. As the coin slowly sinks to the seabed, an unnoticed crisis is quietly brewing in the depths. The two soon find Donald, the BP executive. This platform is leased by BP. The project schedule has been delayed by over 40 days, with additional costs approaching $50 million. In order to catch up, Donald decides to skip some testing procedures, but Jimmy strongly objects. Even though he is just hired to manage the platform, he must take responsibility for the lives of all workers. Under Jimmy's insistence, Donald has to back down, agreeing to conduct a pressure test. The crew adjusts the platform equipment as instructed. Jason closes the annular preventer, and the subsea pipeline gradually closes. The mud and cuttings in the pipe tumbled continuously under the pressure. Watching the slowly changing pressure gauge, Donald felt extremely nervous. If anything went wrong with the test, the company would lose tens of millions more. After waiting a few minutes, the pressure stabilized around 100 pounds. That was still within the safe range. Just as everyone was about to breathe a sigh of relief, more bubbles suddenly appeared on the sea surface. The needle on the pressure gauge then rose quickly. It first jumped to nearly 500 pounds, then surpassed 900 in just seconds, before finally crossing the red line and reaching 1,395 pounds. The result was very clear. The well pressure had seriously exceeded the limit, but Donald was unwilling to accept this result. He thought the pressure was so high, the drill pipe didn't spew mud, which was very unusual. Jimmy and Mike couldn't explain it at the moment. Then Donald suggested one possibility. The anomaly wasn't with the entire well, but with the pressure sensor near the annular blowout preventer. Maybe only a small pocket of pressure was trapped right around the sensor, causing the reading to spike. If we run another negative pressure test on the kill line, we can verify this theory. If it still shows high pressure, then the well really does have a problem. If the kill line shows no pressure, then it's just an electronic malfunction. Donald's explanation seemed to make some sense. Jimmy and Mike couldn't find a clear reason to refute it for now. They couldn't observe the seabed directly. All judgments had to rely on instrument data. In the end, Jimmy tacitly agreed to the second test, but the activity in the seabed strata was becoming more and more violent. Mud in the pipeline, mixed with seabed debris, was viciously slamming into the kill line. When the test began, the gauge still showed a pressure of around 500 psi. Soon, a piece of cutting completely clogged the line. The pressure gauge instantly lost its data, the reading dropping all the way to zero. This was exactly the result Donald wanted to see. What no one realized, however, was that while the data matched expectations, the cause of that result was extremely dangerous. Jimmy then received a call, informing him that the kill line pressure had dropped to zero. Although he still felt something was wrong, the gauge reading was right there in front of him, so he ultimately had to agree to proceed. After getting Jimmy's approval, Jason reopened the annular BOP. The mud that had been held back instantly surged up from the bottom of the well. The control room immediately initiated mud transfer operations, preparing to pump out the heavy mud used for well control. The valve had just been opened. When the pressure gauge spiked into the red zone again, Jason looked closer. The reading had already exceeded 2,300 pounds. He stopped the mud extraction immediately, just as panic set in among the crew. Caleb, who was outside, discovered a crack in the pipe, which was the scene from the beginning of the film. From this moment on, the disaster in the deep sea spiraled completely out of control. Although the first round of mud eruption was quickly suppressed, the seabed formation had already unleashed even greater energy. Under the impact of immense pressure, the annular blowout preventer failed completely very quickly. Uncontrolled mud rushed along the pipe towards the diverter area. After the workers heard the unusual noise, the moment he looked back at the valve, mud shot out like a cannonball. When Andrea saw the alarms, she first thought it was just a routine malfunction, but the call she made, no one could answer. Everyone was desperately trying to escape. Caleb knew that what was coming was a true day of reckoning. The pressure reading on the gauge exceeding 4,000 pounds also proved his judgment was absolutely correct. Jason immediately ordered the second blowout preventer to be closed, but under such immense pressure, the preventer could only buy them a little more time. Knocked down again by the mud flow, Caleb seized the moment to evacuate the nearby workers. By now, the subsea oil and gas had completely broken loose. The workers closest to the wellhead were the first to feel the terrifying force erupting from the depths. Facing such a high-pressure mud gusher, Caleb couldn't take any corrective action at all. Mud, mixed with gravel and metal debris, sprayed in all directions like countless bullets. Jason quickly ordered everyone to protect Caleb and evacuate the work area immediately. Workers on a nearby transport vessel only then realized that an accident had occurred on the platform. When they went on deck to check, a seabird suddenly fell from the sky. Seeing more seabirds flying erratically at low altitude, the crew immediately realized that the leaking natural gas had spread to the surrounding sea. The center of the platform was now in chaos. The continuously gushing mud kept slamming into nearby equipment and pipelines. Several workers couldn't dodge in time and were knocked to the ground by the powerful impact. Mike, who was on a video call with his family, heard the commotion but hadn't yet figured out what was happening. Donald, who was hiding off to the side, his mind went completely blank. It wasn't just mud gushing from the wellhead. There was also a large amount of crude oil and natural gas. The vaporized gas entered the platform's air intake system and was then sucked into the diesel engines through the pipes. The engine speed immediately went out of control, and the platform's only main power system began to run wildly. If the well pipes weren't cut off immediately, the platform would stay connected to the high-pressure oil and gas below the seabed. The pressure inside the well would only grow. When the supply vessel saw the red alert lights on the platform, they sent someone onto the deck to check. The sight before them completely terrified them. The crew immediately returned to the wheelhouse and sent a distress signal to the Coast Guard. After receiving the distress call, the Coast Guard immediately reviewed the footage of the explosion and coordinated all nearby rescue units to launch operations. But the drilling platform was located offshore, and it would take a helicopter at least half an hour to arrive. The fireboat would take even longer. By now, the platform had turned into a sea of flames. A nearby transport ship deployed all its rescue equipment and sent out lifeboats, rushing to the platform to begin rescue operations. Jimmy, stunned by the explosion, gradually regained consciousness. He had been taking a shower and barely had time to get dressed. He struggled to crawl out of his room. Meanwhile, Mike was searching the debris for trapped workers. Although he had been thrown by a door earlier, he was lucky to have avoided serious injury. Jimmy asked Mike to help him to the control room. As the platform's highest-ranking officer, he had to find a way to disconnect the oil well. Along the way, they found several more trapped workers. Amid continuous explosions, Mike still risked his life to rescue them. On the other side, a panicked Donald was running around frantically on the platform. He randomly pushed open a door. By a stroke of fate, he stumbled into the control room. The first group of workers is organizing an evacuation in front of the lifeboats, but the overhead crane has lost control, and its boom is repeatedly crashing into the steel framework above. Once the boom falls, everyone in the lifeboat could be killed instantly. The crane operator risks his life. He climbs back up to the elevated cab. The equipment is severely deformed from the impacts, and the control system is nearly completely jammed. He struggles with all his strength to operate the crane, and finally gets the lifeboat safely away from the platform. But just as the workers below are cheering, he meets his own death. Mike finally helps Jimmy into the control room. Donald is hiding there as well. Seeing this headstrong person in charge, Jimmy's long-suppressed rage erupts completely. After Donald leaves, they immediately activate the emergency disconnect system. The instant the button was pressed, the two massive shear rams inside the drill pipe began to close, trying to completely sever the well connection. The emergency disconnect ultimately failed. Just as everyone was preparing to evacuate, Jimmy insisted that the platform's power had to be restored. Only by restarting the power system could they try to keep the platform in its original position. Mike and Caleb braved the raging fire and rushed to the main electrical room. The entire platform was filled with sparks and flammable gas. During the search, a sudden burst of flames nearly trapped them both. After a difficult emergency repair, Mike finally restored power to the platform. The lights came back on, and the positioning and propulsion systems began working again. The platform was temporarily stabilized. But in the face of this disaster, such a remedy was nothing more than a drop in the bucket. The equipment had just come back online when an even more violent explosion struck. By the time Jimmy and the others reached the evacuation area, all the lifeboats had already been launched. The platform was still constantly exploding and could completely collapse at any moment. Mike immediately organized everyone to deploy the last inflatable life raft. He let others board the raft first, preparing to evacuate last himself. but a sudden explosion threw him and Andrea aside. A worker who hadn't evacuated in time was instantly engulfed in flames. In a panic, he jumped into the sea, and the seawater put out the flames on him. The inflatable life raft had drifted away onto the sea, but the surrounding seawater was set alight by leaking crude oil, so jumping straight down could mean dying in the sea of fire. Mike had no choice but to take Andrea. They flee to the highest point of the platform. Only by jumping from high enough can they clear the burning area on the sea. The two soon reach the helicopter deck. Now the entire platform is like a burning steel hell. The fire could consume them at any moment. While distracting Andrea, Mike puts a life jacket on her, but when she looks down at the sea, Andrea is too terrified to jump. Mike knows they have no choice. Amid panic screams, Mike and Andrea jump into the sea one after the other. A nearby rescue boat arrives just in time, and successfully finds the two in the water. On a transport ship not far away, Jimmy is calling out the names of the rescued one by one, but when he calls several names, no one responds. After Mike and Andrea finally board the ship, the rescue helicopter finally arrived at the scene, and transported the seriously injured workers to the hospital. By then, the drilling platform had already become a complete inferno in the sea of fire. Afterward, Mike and the others were sent back to land. The terrifying near-death experience continued to torment them deeply. Soon after, Mike's wife and daughter arrived. No matter what, being alive was a miracle amid such misfortune. As the family was preparing to leave the hotel, Andrea walked over and gave Mike a hug. On the other side, Caleb's family also shed tears of relief after the ordeal. Mike stepped outside and watched the injured Jimmy reuniting with his family, then silently bid him farewell. The film is based on true events. The accident resulted in the deaths of 11 workers and injured many more. The out-of-control well gushed for 87 consecutive days, spilling an estimated 4.9 million barrels of crude oil. It caused severe ecological damage to the Gulf of Mexico. This became one of the worst offshore oil spills in U.S. history.